Hello, what it do? Tonight we're gonna party like it's 1942. Welcome to FATS. On this episode, it stands for Fascist Albums of the 70s. If there's such a thing as an ebony queen, then there has to be an Aryan goddess. It's not hatred, it's just science. That's right, today we're talking about the blonde hair, blue-eyed bombshell Nico. That was a really bad intro, but it was either gonna be that or I recite her hate crimes in like a really bad impression of her. I hate black people. Nico's not only an interesting figure in music because it's kind of rare to have a female baritone singer, but her music is really strange. I think to even understand the strangeness of her music, you gotta like dial it back to like the beginning of her career. Back in like the late 50s to like early 60s, she was just like a model and an actress. She was in Fellini's La Dolce Vita, and I guess her modeling career kind of led her into New York and around that whole art pop scene that Andy Warhol was kind of fostering under his factory, which led to Andy Warhol assigning her to be, I guess, the front woman of the Velvet Underground, because Lou Reed kind of felt a little underwhelming because he was just kind of like rude and like quiet all the time. I don't think either Lou Reed or Nico wanted Nico to be in the band. It was just kind of like a thing assigned to Andy Warhol, and she just kind of departed it, I think, after the first Velvet Underground album. What came after, actually, like, I haven't actually listened to the original Velvet Underground album. I only know like 2 songs off of it, I'm gonna be honest, but I really like the follow-up to it, Chelsea Girl by Nico, which is like a very like Baroque pop, very like quaintly arranged selections where all the songs were written by other people, but it really does feel like a complete album, not only through like Nico singing, but also the arrangements and kind of the thematic similarities of them all. One of the more popular songs off of Chelsea Girls these days was written by Jackson Browne when he was only 14, which is quite impressive because that song is like the saddest thing ever. I can't believe you were that sad at 14. Like, did he fucking fail algebra class or some shit? I'm only joking. I think children's mental health is very important. Even though Nico was like a very successful person, I think she kind of felt a certain sadness around it because she was only famous purely because she was a model. Even though she's doing artistic stuff like being a singer and starring in movies, it's mostly for her looks. And I think what pursued her to kind of make more experimental and kind of stranger music is to distance herself from like stereotype of just being a pretty face. She tried to strive for like a bit of like an ugly look. And I think like this ugly look is a really good descriptor of her stuff from like the late 60s to early 70s. And yes. This is not only fascist albums of the 70s, but we're talking about an album from 1968. Welcome to Trump's America, where I don't have to play by the rules because it's my show. But more seriously, I really wanted to talk about her second studio album rather than her third, Desert Shore, which is a fan favorite by many and actually came out in the 70s, because I think her second album, Marble Index, is so weird and is kind of the black sheep of the kind of trilogy she had during this time, which consists of Marble Index, Desert Shore, and The End. I think the best thing a piece of commentary or journalism could provide to a piece of artwork is kind of understand where this artist was coming from when the end result can be a little hard to get into. Basically translating something that may be lost on other people later. It's like I read like a Michael Snow book. I forget the name. I'll like put it up. And I like Michael Snow stuff. I think it's super cool, but I just don't understand like the landscape film genre conceptually and like what the kind of
thesis and like origin behind it is. So I think reading up on it made me understand that, oh, it's not just about movies or narratives, it's about time and like film time and like blah, 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 blah. This isn't a show about movies. I'm not gonna get into it deeply, but rest assured, I understand Michael Snow now. Speaking on the music, this album is super strange from her first album, which is like a straightforward kind of like kitschy pop album. I would best describe this album as gothic wallpaper music, because this album very much anchored in the gothic aesthetics. I'm pretty sure there's a quote from Peter Murphy of Bauhaus where he describes Nico's music and the Marble Index as kind of Mary Shelley gothic in comparison to other gothic rock acts, which were like the Hammer or Universal adaptations of Frankenstein. Nico's was just simply the original, which I love because I am a Shelley purist, dude. I don't think any adaptation of Frankenstein even pales in comparison to how fantastic of a read the original 1818 text is. Come at me, bro. I think the best way to adapt Frankenstein is probably gonna be like a 6-part like HBO series where each episode is like an hour 20 minutes, because like all these like hour 40 to like 2-hour movies are just not cutting it for me. But essentially Nico kind of crafted the gothic sound from this album, and it's not necessarily like the Sisters of Mercy or anything like that, but it is real fucking goth, dude. It is real darkness. I think a huge consultant which allowed Nico to make this album and even consider songwriting in the first place was the Doors' Jim Morrison, who encouraged her to essentially write down her dreams. That's where a lot of the material in this album kind of sounds like it's from. It kind of sounds like a dream. Not dreamlike in like a fantasy, like unicorn fucking way. It's like a dream where you're waiting on a line in New York, which looks geographically like New Orleans, to meet Benjamin Franklin. And then a dude you used to go to college with is like a midget now, and he like keeps tapping you and wants to make toast, so you turn to your left and there's a toaster right there, so you make the toast for him. It's like a dream where you're just like, what are these things? Like how does this even correlate, bro? She also started to read more, including the works of aforementioned Mary Shelley and poet William Blake. But more generally, she was just inspired by the period of like 19th century English romanticism. Apparently this album was recorded on like an opioid bender. The whole album was recorded in 4 days, where Nico and her producer Fraser Mohawk would just like shoot up heroin. So essentially, like, On the Corner was the cocaine album, Super Ape was the weed album, and now we're on heroin. Like all those other albums, I don't think drugs are necessarily tied to their sonics. What makes all those albums good, and especially in Nico's case during this point in her career, is her endeavor to make something so creatively legitimate. But what's the reason I like this album? I like this album because it's kind of like a Halloween album. It's just like a little spooky, it's a little scary, it's a little strange. It also features some of my favorite Nico songs, honestly. At first, I really did not understand this album, I will say it first and foremost, but I think that's what Nico would have wanted during her ugly mission statement at this time, to kind of be unappealable to most people. But over time, this has really grown onto me, and it has a lot of really interesting musical ideas that you can hear in a lot of music today. It's very inspirational. I can see why a lot of people take note from this album. Okay, so we're gonna start it off with one of the more accessible songs on this album. It's like slightly pop adjacent, but not really. And it's titled No One Is There.
Across from behind my window screen, beam is dancing down
Okay, so it's a bit of a Baroque track that has this really sick 4-piece viola that interweaves through Nico's vocals in almost a dissociative way, harkening back to that specific dreamlike quality I was talking about earlier. It's clear early on in the album that Nico's singing is the melodic lead on most of the tracks, and the string arrangements here are simply to provide emotional emphasis or links together the unpredictable nature of Nico's vocals, so it doesn't feel completely dissonant while still keeping true to the fluctuous nature of this album, which is a really hard line to walk on. Bit of a backwards comparison, but there's really nothing else that sounds like this album. I think the string arrangements that Van Dyke Parks provides to Yana Newsom's Ease is another successful example of what's going on here. And that being said, the instrumental here isn't just tacked on. John Cale, the arranger and member of the Velvet Underground, didn't just put on a 4x4 beat that Nico can just flow upon, which he kind of did do on the more post-punk adjacent albums of the 80s. But rather, the instrumental feels completely individual of itself, hence the dissociative nature of it, to have this very humanistic depth to it. And I think that's also in part of the dry mixing here that contributes to this human quality, where it's not superbly overproduced to the point where it sounds extraordinary or nostalgic, but rather the acoustics make it sound like the song is actually being performed in a concert hall directly in front of us. Nico's lyrics are also very poetic as they are in song, where my analysis of them in this song is that it's about someone being taunted or mocked by some dude that isn't really there on some schizo shit. But I don't really give a fuck about lyrics in any kind of music unless it really hits to me specifically. Nico's singing has a very ancient prose-like quality to it, with her alternative enunciation of words that allows some of them to be extended or prolonged, which is very much of a skill you need to acquire to be good at spoken poetry or prose. Really hearkening and honing in that gothic nature. After this is the strangely foreboding Ari song, which is dedicated to Nico's son Ari. There's a really funny bleep note that punches in the beginning of the song to let you know that the heroin they've been shooting up has kicked in. Comes in at any moment from now.
Dude, I fucking love that song. So funny. Anyway, I can't believe she dedicated this to her 6-year-old son. It sounds like a fucking funeral song. Super doom and gloom. I think this is one of the first songs where Nico uses her harmonium, which is an instrument she would kind of take on and claim as her own in her solo career. Sail away, my little boy. What, are you gonna ship this shit across the Atlantic? Dude, what the fuck? I think Nico had a really strange relationship with her son and his upbringing. Because during the 60s and 70s, as an actress and model kind of does, she would move from places like New York to Italy to London, so she never really had like a solid household to properly raise a child, I guess. So oftentimes Ari would be taken care of by a French babysitter who said in the 95 TV documentary Nico Icon that Nico would only feed him potato chips. Which sounds awesome. I fucking love potato chips. I don't know what I'm trying to say here, but I guess it's like strange relationship equates strange song. I don't know. Being a mom in your 20s while traveling, doing gigs, and being a junkie must sound tough, honestly. Or being a mom in general must be tough. I don't know. Okay, so for the next song here, I really want to talk about Frozen Warnings, which is the second to last track. But honestly, I don't have a lot to say other than that it's simply beautiful. It's one of Nico's most beautiful songs, and at least one of my favorite. It's just a lovely icy ambient song that has this guitar lead similar to what Frippin' Eno we're gonna do a few years later, and it just kind of gets amplified more by Nico's singing. It sounds very wonderful. That's gonna be your homework for this episode. Listen to that song when you have the time. But what I really want to talk about is the final track, Evening of Light, which is just monumental. That song is the reason I wanted to talk about this record. It's the longest song on the album, so it takes a while to start going. So I'm going to butcher it by bringing it a minute forward, so sorry.
Midnight winds are landing at the end of time. Midnight winds are landing at the end of time.
So, Evening of Light starts out with this really glittery staccato harpsichord that's looped similarly to Steve Reich's earlier work regarding tape recordings. It's definitely one of the more heavenly sounds on this album. And Nico's singing is actually pretty on cue for the music when it starts out and has this really triumphant and powerful sound to it. It sounds like she's casting some witchy-ass spell, or she's like repeating the same few lines as Kale's instrumental evolves. In this evolution, a very subtle cello bridges these staccato moments through a really solid bass line, but the looping harpsichord as the song continues becomes way more uncanny, and the delay catches up to it with a strange, silent backing drone that emerges purely from a technological side effect. And essentially this cello plays into this uncanniness by having a sort of life of its own where it abandons the original bass line and riffs away and goes in on double stops. But one thing about this album is that they don't credit any of the instruments here, which is to its advantage to make the music sound more foreign, but I actually can't tell if this is like an electric guitar or an electric cello or just like a cello filtered through something, because it gets way more distorted and aggressive, kind of erupting from this underbelly of harpsichord waves, and kind of reminds me of Sun O's. Yeah, I call them Sun O. Sun O's arrangements on their live albums. What's interesting is that this cello-sounding instrument doesn't dismantle the song's structure. It actually builds upon it by riffing. It's really Nico's vocals that do the jobs of making it feel so uneasy as they progressively get more shaken, unpredictable, and further dissociative. The harpsichord is consistent only by virtue of it being a rhythmically looped tape, and the cello is a very profound element, but it's really Nico's singing that changes the directory of the song. And the repeating lyrics help out because there's so much variation each time she says them again and again. Slowly, the song just gets more and more evil from its heavenly feeling, and I think that's thanks to a really lovely concoction of experimental elements that seem effortlessly put together here. I don't really know how to end this episode other than, man, I fucking love listening to some Nico, dude. Her voice is one of a kind. Not only in just operatics, but the way she just breaks down each thing. I love her despite her highly debated racist and misogynistic tendencies. I think Nico's voice is so profound to me and speaks volumes. She can be really frail and very boastful at the same time. And I think that her poetic influences really harbor this fact because her voice really illustrates the lyrics that she's trying to propose to us. She illustrates her point in a huge way. That being said, I hope you have the Marble Index as a part of your rotation. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you next week.